What's up, internet gremlins? The GM overtuned the encounter, killed all the players, everyone got mad, they all did shots and left. So session got canceled.
I wish I could do shots whenever something I didn't like happened in D&D.
All right.
You guys ever hear the cool stories of people like having funerals for characters and like burning like the character sheets on like firewood and shit?
No, I've never done a funeral pyre for my characters.
Sadly,
It sounds exactly like it's like anytime a character dies, they're like, all right, guys, Viking funeral. Let's all go out in the yard, get some brews, fucking burn the character sheet.
Oh my god.
Here's your halfling rogue.
Here's your halfling rogue.
Always the halfling rogue.
My favorite fucking bit. I still love that.
Fantastic.
So we are gathered here today with tis I, Josh. Tis also Matt. Tis also Isaiah.
What's up?
And tis also Sam.
Hey. Yes.
I just thought of the wazza. I don't know why.
Fuck.
So, I bet you're wondering why I've gathered you all here today.
No, this is the usual time, the usual place.
Happens to be the hot spot right now.
All right, listen,
Yeah.
pal.
There's the Helsinger Bridge. Wow. Let's kill all the fun. Put the fun in camps, why don't you? Yeah, you fun Nazi.
Fucking Christ. Well, anyway, we're just gonna slide past that one.
What? Come on. It's not like it's my joke. You can blame Team Force.
That's true. That's true.
I'm blaming them for a lot of things.
As is the usual nature with when topic ideas hit me. We had a session not so long ago, and I had a thought. I had a realization. I had an epiphany, if you will, for running the game. And I thought, well, this shan't be ignored. I don't.
Yeah.
Wow. I
Yeah,
can't
keep
talk.
going.
I can't talk right now. This is impressive. I realized a couple of interesting things from the fight that my players had with an ancient sapphire shadow dragon, and there was a couple of little things that happened that sparked some thinking. And so I wanted to little sit around the old campfires with the brewskis and discuss making your tactical combat game more interesting. And I know lots of people have talked this subject to death, but I feel like there's a couple of points that I realized that I don't personally hear very often. Now, I may be off base with this, and that I just am not, I don't know, in the wrong corners of the internet or whatever. But I feel like I had a couple of revelations that are not commonly talked about. So, that's where we're at. Tactical combat. And I specified I originally was like, my brain was like, yeah, grid-based combat game. It doesn't necessarily have, like, the grid part is not really the most important thing here. So that's why I'm just using the phrase tactical combat stuff. Because, not every game uses a grid. Shocker, I know.
Crazy.
Wild. Bug wild. I'm just curious.
Mhm.
We're going to do a little experiment because I want to see if any of you guys are going to say any of the things that are in my brain. We're going to go down the list real quick. And I'm just curious what you think is the thing. What do you think is, like, if you had to pick one thing? Obviously, there's more than one. But if you had to pick one thing to really spruce up your sort of turn-based tactical combat game in an RPG, what's the one thing you would really, really zone in on? What do you think's the most important? Whoever wants to go first.
Weapon tags.
Are you shit posting, or is that your actual answer?
No, I'm being so serious. I think weapon tags and like the fact that weapons
extrapolate
doing
that
things.
point.
So as you all may have seen, one D&D's Nuts just got its new equipment rules, and now all the weapons have their own like mastery abilities. And a good example of this is, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's the Great Club has one where it can knock you 5 or 15 feet back, whatever. It can knock you backwards.
I think it's 10.
So the idea of like, you can very easily with that ability start setting up some really intricate like tactical positioning by, for example, knocking someone into a kill box, right? Like the wizard would be like, oh, I'm gonna hold my action to cast Fireball. When the barbarian knocks him into the spot, I'm gonna drop it on him. That way, none of our allies get hit in the blast. Stuff like that.
So, so really, you're talking. It's less about the weapon tag so much as like a battlefield manipulation abilities.
Yeah, like another good one I like is the rapiers have an ability called Vex, which basically just lets you do. Or no, not that. No, wrong one. The greatsword has one that basically just lets you do chip damage. That's really good at forcing. Yeah. It's really, that would be really interesting for forcing the tanks to cycle into the back line for a few like rounds or maybe a few hits just to like make sure they can hold up for the next round. It becomes very Fire Emblem-esque.
You know, it's funny you mentioned
your literal positioning will matter a lot more than it used to.
It's funny you mentioned that particular one because when I saw the Graze thing, I was like, oh, this mechanic has existed for years in Stars Without Number, and it's called shock damage. And yeah, why was this not a thing? Probably should have just had this. This was in there before, but you know, like.
Well, so they did have that of some sort of like chip damage mechanic. I believe it was a magic item that did it.
I could see that. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it still exists to this day. I just don't remember exactly what it is. It's a tough balance you have to rock, right? Because if it's...
Oh, it can be annoying for sure.
Because, you know, I remember in my first game with Cardell, like the first 20 odd sessions, chip damage just was a thing and there was no rhyme or reason to it. Like we couldn't really understand what the math was. And that's, you know, that's partially what made it so frustrating. But it was just being like, oh, okay, so that, you know, my AC is 12 because I'm a wizard, and you know every miss counts for me because I'm a wizard. So then the attack missed and I still took 6 damage. Well, I'm a wizard, so that's half my health bar. Even though the attack missed.
I mean, it definitely it's a delicate thing. You definitely don't want your like graze and or chip damage to be, you know, too much for that reason. And yes, if the math is not clear, it can be annoying. It's pretty straight in Stars Without Number and by extension Worlds Without Number. Weapons just have a shock damage value. So like the weapon determines how much shock damage it does when you attack an opponent. Which D&D it's not doing exactly that, but you know, D&D it's just your stat modifier. I guess your strength and or dex modifier determines that amount. I had another thought, but I lost it. So Matt or Sam, go ahead.
So I'm with making combat more interesting by making, you know, the weapons more interesting. I also think that a huge problem, this is particularly for people who don't like end up putting a lot of effort into the maps, whether it's digitally because I mean you're working with a digital map, or you know because you're making up a map on the fly because you didn't expect your players to go into this area, whether you're digital or in person. Maps are like really interesting when you can actually tell the terrain and make a plan around them. A lot of the time it's just, hey, here's a room, it looks slightly different, I promise that it actually has different terrain, but like you can't really tell that because, you know, I mean, at least digitally it's like, cool, I'm looking at a map, I understand, but literally it's not much different than, you know, oh hey, here's a room, we're gonna stand in this 5x5 area, you know, these 25 squares are pretty much where combat's gonna take place. That's it, like that's just how it goes. So, you know, I definitely find that map design can help with that. Obviously it depends on a lot of things because, you know, you can only do so much on a digital format. Like, you know, Roll20, I haven't used any other.
The ever elusive Z dimension when fucking Roll20 maps, and you're like, God damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have, you know, you have your XYs, but you don't have the actual height and you're like, okay, cool. Cool. Thank you for
Yeah, I mean, you
having
can do
that
height,
conversation.
you just have to mentally keep track of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on Roll20, they do make it easy where you have to buy them, but these little token status symbols you can have on character tokens.
Yeah, some people
creature
made
tokens, and they have
the
ones that
flight
have
ones.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought
That's-
a pack, and it's helped out so fucking much.
Yeah,
especially with one character that can fly.
Man, all I'm
I get
hearing is pay to win.
I mean, yeah, I mean it's $5, so it's like.
Yeah, that's community that's community members specifically making art for that purpose. I do feel like they should add, like, when you click on the tokens in Roll20 and there's the 3 bubbles. I do feel like they should add a 4th bubble dedicated to elevation. I feel like that would be useful.
Yeah, even if it's
That'd be
like a little marker next to the token that's like 15 feet up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Matt,
Very nice.
where do you fall on this? Or what's the thing, if you have to pick one thing that you feel like is the most important thing to spice up the old tactical combat?
This is weird. I get for me because when I think about combat, I mostly it's like again, me Matt, the narrative dude. It's mostly the story and picking the right type of obstacles for the players. So like you're not gonna throw a troll at the players if they're on the fire plane. It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know, fire troll.
Matt out here
Fire
dodging
troll.
the question.
I know, right?
A little bit.
That wasn't the question.
Yeah.
But
No, because the original question, and then you switched it.
no, the question is if you want to make your sort of if you're using your usual D&D tactical style combat, what's the one thing you focus on to spice up the combat? What's the
I thought the original thing was what was the most important thing to you.
Yeah, but specifically within that bubble, within the bubble of making the combat more tactically and more interesting and more engaging.
I guess I'll focus on creatures then, because Sam already kind of got environment. Like I think environment is very important, but I guess
you can
I'll
say the same answer.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
I'll say, yeah. Nah. Well, I'll choose something. I think again the right type of creatures, can make any kind of encounter a slog, or they can make them fun as fuck. So I think whatever variety, depending on what game you're playing, Cyberpunk, picking the right type of what are they even called? I forgot what they're called in Cyberpunk. The enemies. Like
I don't remember either.
Whatever you. I'm so fucking goons. Yeah, whatever.
My
Yeah,
brain
random
went to
corpo
psychers,
goons.
Corpo goons, yeah,
exactly.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I think creatures definitely help out. Especially if you're like trying to be like more tactical. So like, do you have some
an
like
appropriate answer for any type of game, honestly?
yeah, because like you can do the basic like, I just got to throw one big guy, and it's like, all right, what about you have like. I'm going to use a lot of 4th edition, verbiage. You got a brute. And it's like, oh, okay, you got a brute. Wouldn't it be cool if you had some artillery guys, like shooting bows in the background? Your players have to deal with getting, like, fucking pot-shotted while they're dealing with this giant ogre or some shit?
Okay. Yeah. So none of you guys got as specific. Well, Isaiah got kind of close, but none of you guys got as specific as I was getting at. So we're gonna nail down even further. But I did want to start with the map thing, because everybody brings this up, right? If you go online and you do the Googlers and you say how make 5e combat fun ? You'll see lots and lots of videos of people being like, it's all about the environment. You got to have a cool environment. You got to have
environmental hazards,
environment, blah blah blah.
My player, actually, I told you guys I did that survey. That was like a big thing that one of my players really wants more into the game. He's like, hey, can you throw environmental combat, like hazards at us, like more? I'm like, all right, sure.
That kind of, so let's get into that one a little bit, because having the nice, pretty map and having a kind of interesting area to fight in, sure, that's all well and good. However, I feel like that is only a small initial step into really getting into the meat and potatoes, because it doesn't, even if you have a super sexy map, or you have like a really cool like area the characters are fighting in, that's only going to carry you so far, you know, because at the end of the day, if you have a really cool map, but none of the characters or enemies have any reason to move around or have any reason to cause something to change or have a reason to interact with the map, then it kind of just becomes a pretty picture on the table, you know? Or in some cases, a sort of a quickly drawn grid map thingy.
Yeah. You know, like I said, you know, a lot of the time maps just end up being, this is the area that we fight in.
Yeah,
it's pretty. That's it. That's all you get.
So the thing, like, and for sure, the map can influence the situation, right? If the players are on one side of a really long, you know, if the map is like 300 feet across and the players are on one side of a ravine, and the only way to get across is over this bridge, and then there's enemies firing at them from the other side, obviously the map is an aspect that you have to deal with in that scenario, because it's like, okay, well, we can only move like 60 some odd feet around. We only have the one-way path through. How are we going to deal with this problem? Then someone goes, well, I could cast fly, but if they hit me, I might break concentration while you're over the pit, blah, blah, blah. You know, that kind of thing absolutely can make things interesting. But you can also just have, like Sam said, you can also just have, ooh, pretty landscape, but also my character's not going to move. I'm just going to stand here and hit dudes anyway. So the pretty landscape is fucking irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people suggest having like a cool or interesting, like a pretty map or a cool area to fight in, you know, an interesting area to fight in, as like, that's the key. If you have like a really interesting area to fight, like that's the fucking secret. I feel like people overblow the value of that a little bit. Like, it's not irrelevant. Like, I'm not going to say, like, it doesn't matter. Because, obviously, if your characters are just fighting in an empty white square box, that's, you know, not great. But I do feel like a lot of people... Because I've seen so many videos where they're like, oh, yeah, the terrain, the map. And I'm like... I feel like it gets overvalued so much to the point that I feel like it kind of overshadows some other things I think you can focus on. And Matt was kind of getting at it with the monsters a little bit. There's a nugget there. And actually also what Isaiah was saying of like forcing moving around, there's also like, because you know, you don't need a fancy pretty map to like cause people to move around or something, right? You just need a purpose. They just need a reason to move around or be forced to move around or whatever it is. It doesn't matter necessarily what the area around them is if they have a different reason. Like, it could be a big empty cave still. Fuck.
That's why
I lost that last sentence.
I forgot. No, you're good. That's why I think when the Wildemount book came out, so many people were nutting over the two wizard subclasses.
Nut.
Because one was obviously the Time Wizard fucking... It's like, what if Divination Wizard was on crack? Like, okay. But the Graviturge was basically, I get to play with the battle map now, DM.
Yes.
He's just like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because Graviturge is... If you want to play with meta, it is definitely not as good as Chronogist, but it's the one that I was like, that's the cooler one.
Yeah, same. Like, all the spells are very
that.
thematic. It's basically like a control. It basically, I'm moving pieces on the board. I'm throwing a spell that sucks the enemies closer to the fighter, or I'm teleporting players on the map.
No, for sure. I absolutely, I had a similar thought looking at the Graviturgist. But I was like, this is definitely the more interesting of the two.
But it definitely needs... You need those Wildemount spells, although using the Graviturgis without any of those Graviturgis spells,
not the same.
Great. Not a good time. No.
Yeah, I feel like I need to address the maps. Everybody really loves to talk about cool maps, and I'm like, absolutely, but there's more to it than that. You know, there's much more going on here. I think it's also worth pointing out, I've noticed that there's a bit of a trend online of people making visually appealing maps that are not usable maps.
Of course not.
This is a huge issue I've noticed where like I'll see a map and I'll be like, this looks really cool. I don't understand how the characters are supposed to move through this space. You know what I mean? Like it's not clear where can they stand, where can they not, what's the path, et cetera, et cetera.
It is absolutely a problem when I look for maps. Like it's just, you know, nothing against the people who make maps. Like you fucking,
like they look cool.
Good, yeah, they look great.
They'd
like,
be good. They're good, like splash art.
Yeah, like one particular one that comes to mind is in Avernus. Like they'll have the like ship that you're not supposed to ever go to,
right?
But like it exists and you're able to look at it, and like they'll make maps for that, and then it's like, okay, cool, that could be an interesting twist. I could use this, and then it's like, how the fuck am I supposed to have my players use this map? This map is either too big or shit's just in places
too big, or too many things in the way, or not enough space to like move around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been watching a certain what do they call it, D20 or something, roll D20 on YouTube, and they do a bunch of like, you know, let's plays and shit. The guy's a madman for not Dimension 20, not Dimension 20. It's called like D20 Roll or something. But they do a lot of like, you know, D&D module like playthroughs, but in the Adventure League style. What he does is he'll just make a gigantic map, have every map that he's going to use that session on the one fucking board, and then just move the players to that one map he's going to use, reveal the area, instead of just having each map be its own individual map like you can do on Roll20. And I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, sounds like it might work, but also what the fuck? Like I don't know.
I don't think that's a good idea just by virtue of Roll20 is not going to run very well.
You have such a gigantic map, all the tokens, like
interesting.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of like the idea, right? Like if the maps that we had in Strahd, where they were like cordoned off into the floors for each corner of the map is a different floor. I think you could get some really cool shit going on there with like you know, it's that scene in every like action movie where the characters are all fighting their different fights in the same space, right? So like if you're in like a saloon, people are fighting up on the balconies, and then the camera cuts down and it's people at the bottom floor like fighting the goons off, and then it's someone outside doing like a shootout, shit like that.
Yes, if Roll20 can handle it. That would be my primary concern. I think Roll20 would have a hard time with that much shit going on.
It may, yeah.
Which would drastically like dampen my joy. But yes, no, there's a cool for sure. But also, you don't need to have it all on one page to do that, because you can have characters on separate pages in Roll20. You know, like you can have one player be on page 4 and one player be on page 2. Like you could do that already.
Oh yeah, I know.
So, I didn't know you could do that.
Oh yeah, you can do that.
You can split how the viewership goes?
Yes, if you I believe if you hold Alt and then click on their name, you know how you have the little name things across the bottom of the screen?
Hold on, I'm literally opening Roll20 right the fuck now. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you can hold Alt and you can click and drag. You know how there's the little player ribbon over the map page? You can click and drag an individual player and place them on a different page.
I'm gonna. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not gonna remember how to do this, so you're gonna have to re-explain this to me on another day. But like,
you just you know their names. You know how you have their names across the bottom.
Yeah, of course.
You hold Alt and just drag that name to whatever page you want them to be on.
That's wild. My mind's been fucking blown, dude.
And then if you want to merge them back with everyone else, you just left click and drag them over the big red player flag. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That shit crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Oh, that would have been so cool.
Listen. If you need Roll20 tricks, I know pretty much all of them.
God, I have to fucking. I was trying a few weeks back, and I was trying to figure out the dynamic lighting, and I was like, I have this one very specific question, and then Matt sent me a 30-minute fucking tutorial, and I was like, why? Why are tutorials all like this? Why are they humongous? I just need the answer to my one tiny specific
You should have just asked.
question. I
Should've just
did,
asked
and
me.
I was like, oh, yeah, well, you weren't there. And like, I was really thankful because I did like find it in the video, but I was fucking ranting to Matt for like 20 minutes being like, God damn it, why are they all so damn long?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So we've gone on and on about the map situation, but like I said, if you do the googly googagox, you know, the map shit is gonna be the first thing you fucking find on YouTube 9 times out of 10. So that subject's been beat to death. You want any more information on utilizing maps or whatever, go somewhere else. So the first point I want to hit that came from our session with the fighting the ancient sapphire dragon, and we've talked about this before, is off-turn movement and actions. Specifically having the enemy doing off-turn movements and actions. Because a huge part, and the reason I really thought about this is a big part that for at least on my end of the table, made the ancient sapphire dragon fight particularly interesting, was that he could teleport 60 feet away both on his turn as a bonus action and also as a legendary action on someone else's turn.
Bro, teleporting for some reason is a thing players hate. I told you guys about the one archdevil my players fought at level like 19.
No,
every time legendary action. Oh, he's gonna teleport 120 feet away. Our players are like, fucking no,
because
fight us.
You see, that's the thing, Matt. It disrupts everything that they've.
Yes,
it disrupts everything that they've thought about, and like. So the reason why that is frustrating to players is because you don't experience that at lower levels. You go through most of the game before interacting with anything that can do that. Because,
True, it is a little bit of a shock when it happens.
Yeah, especially because you're high level. You're like, oh, I can prepare an action to do this. No, you can't. Like, the guy teleports away. Fuck you.
I had actually, I'm using Josh the Draconian Mastermind in my game a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
And as he was getting his ass kicked, he's like, he's gonna Dimension Door. All my players are level 4, so like that's it. As soon as I hit level 5, Matt, everyone we're grabbing Counterspell.
yeah.
Like,
but
we ain't having this.
It absolutely can be. It totally can be like a player frustration, and honestly, even in my session, I do remember both Isaiah and Sam getting annoyed because the dragon kept teleporting around. But
doesn't help when you can't fly.
It doesn't help when you can't fly. It's true. But the by having the enemy be able to do shit not on their turn, it shakes it up so that rounds don't get monotonous. That's the big thing, right? It makes things interesting because things change up on a round by round basis because the enemy is able to do shit on the fly. And the fact that they can move around and do other actions, it disrupts plans, and disrupting plans means that you can't just do the same thing over and over. Because often what ends up happening, you know, particularly once in like the 5 to 10 D&D range, definitely big thing where you have your like strats that the party uses and you get into your MMO rotation and there's very little that disrupts that. So you could just keep doing it. And so it gets kind of monotonous because you're like, well, we know what we're going to do. We're just going to keep doing it. Why would we do anything else? We have our strat figured. But suddenly, if the enemy is doing shit that disrupts that on his on your turn or on someone else's turn outside of the usual that turn economy, it shakes the whole situation up. And, you know, a little player frustration's all right.
As long as you don't do it too much.
Yeah, it really depends on how it's fed to you. Because, like, I like one of the things that will always fucking infuriate me is zombies in 5e, very specifically at lower level. At higher level, they'll make their undead fortitude save, and you're like, damn it, all right, I'll get him next time. When you're at really low level and you just can't do enough damage to kill the zombie, it is not nerve-wracking. It's just annoying. You're just like, oh, cool, I'm just gonna waste these actions hitting the zombie and not fucking kill it. Congrats, oh, look at that, I'm dead. God, that shit's annoying.
I think that ties in really well with what we talked about with my last episode, horror. Like, there's a very clear difference between making something stressful and making something just kind of frustrating, and you end up really like hurting your players sometimes. And I don't mean in like I hurt their character kind of way. I mean like you just kind of make them mad. And like I don't think making someone mad is the way to go when you're like, yeah, combat, Fucko McGee over here, he's gonna counterspell everything that you've done. Did you say that he has spell slots? Incorrect. He has innate spell casting. Fuck you. Like unlimited uses per day. Yeah, exactly. That's less stressful and more. Well, now we have to. If we want to do anything, we have to burn a reaction every fucking turn.
It's, you know what it is? It's that the fucking gif of the cat that just leans its head back and starts screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every monster now, guys, I'm giving them Misty Step. Even the skeletons, especially the skeletons.
I'm gonna be honest. The zombie's undead fortitude ability doesn't really bother me that much, just because statistically it's so they'll probably at lower levels survive it 2 times at most. Because they only come back with the 1 HP. So as soon as you hit them again, they have to make the check again. If it's pretty unlikely that they make it like over and over and over again. That's fairly low chance. And then at high levels, you're hitting them for so much damage, they're almost certainly not going to make it. Well, so they don't bother me that much.
It really depends on the number of zombies. Like if there's, let's say you have a party of 5 and there's 2 zombies, there's a not insignificant chance that your like level 3 party will wail on those 2 zombies for 4 turns and not kill them. I'm speaking from experience. This has fucking happened.
I mean, 2 zombies, I feel like usually they'll survive at least 1 undead fortitude check and then maybe a second one. It's like, that's not that much wailing on them. You know what I mean? Like it's not like they're staying up for 6 rounds in a row or anything like that. Unless you get really unlucky, which, I mean, possible, but
you can.
Unlikely. Technically possible, but very unlikely. I've never seen them survive that many. Like, I've never seen them survive so long to the point where it's like, all right, this is like absurd, Also,
go on.
Is there a way to circumvent it so that does a certain damage type?
If they take radiant damage.
Yeah. Okay. So
the only reason I know that is because it happened a couple of games ago where our Radiant Soul Monk, every time the zombies were coming back up, she's just like, oh, I should probably blast those guys and just fucking Vegeta energy bolts them.
Oh, yeah. So it's unless they take radiant damage or from a critical hit. So a crit can also negate it, which, yeah, I mean, that checks out. Yeah, I don't know. That one don't bother me.
Fair enough. Keep going.
That being said, if there's like 10 plus zombies, it can start to get annoying in that scenario.
Well, that's something else I said though, right? Like if you have a bunch of zombies at low level, you're like, fuck. 2 zombies is doable. That's like that's the good mix of challenging and like it's a little frustrating because you're doing the Vegeta why screaming why won't you die, but it's doable. But if you're like low level and you've got like 6 or 7 zombies, you're like, all right, go cool guys, I'll just see y'all later because we're not winning, so I'll just see y'all.
I mean, you'll probably win. Zombies aren't super dangerous, TBH. But it's not like it's like a TPK or anything like that. But that is not, well, that's sort of an off-turn action, sort of, kind of. But yeah, the idea of legendary actions or something similar to it is, and it doesn't just have to be teleporting or anything like that. Really, anything that can sort of disrupt the usual flow of things, I think is almost always a pretty like fun idea. Obviously, you don't want it to be so disruptive that like everything grinds to a halt, because that's the opposite effect of what you're trying to do.
You don't want an ending to be like, all right, legendary action, reverse gravity, except for himself. Everyone's like,
yeah, it's like you want it to be able to give the bad guy an advantage, but not just completely shut the whole situation down. Or if they do shut this whole situation down, you know, make it like fairly temporary, right? Like a turn or two or whatever, not, you know, not forever or whatever. You know, because I've said this before, a big part of like what makes bosses and stuff in a lot of video games dangerous is the fact that you have to respect what the boss is doing. You can't just beat the shit out of them and ignore all of their cool powers. You know, I always use the Dark Souls example because it's the easiest one, but like, you can't just run up to the boss and hit them a whole bunch and stun lock them so they don't get to do anything. Part of what makes them a dangerous boss is you have to deal with what they are going to do in response to you, and there's no way to get around it. So
you're saying I grinded for this Moonveil for nothing? God damn it.
Yes. So it's like the tabletop equivalent of that is having the boss do shit on the player's turns, right? Because if you keep it strictly turn-based, then the boss can't do anything in response to what you're doing because it's not his turn. But that's where legendary actions come in. That lets them do shit on not their turn. So you can slap them around a little bit, and then all of a sudden they can slap you back, or, you know, teleport away, or, you know, hit you with a big wing flap and send you flying 30 feet or whatever, you know, shit like that.
Yeenagu.
Yeah, like exactly. Just Yeenagu that shit and just smack him real hard. You know, like that kind of stuff is really what, and quite frankly, that was one of the things that made the Yeenagu fight a pain in the ass and actually dangerous, is because we were getting slapped in all sorts of directions.
Yeah.
And he was just like, smack, 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 stun, confusion, smack, smack, smack.
And you can only do it to one player too, which makes it less frustrating.
Right. It's not so overpowering that it shuts down the whole fight. Like, the fact that the ancient Sapphire Dragon could teleport 60 feet away is annoying, but it's not so far away that he can just ignore everything that you could potentially do to him. You know what I mean? It's not 200 feet away or some shit. And also, he has to get closer to hit you in the first place, which is sort of that balancing act of the whole thing. Yeah, basically legendary actions. This is real good stuff. It's one of my favorite things in 5e is legendary actions.
Even creatures with extra reactions also helps.
Reactions too,
Yeah, Marilith with 6 reactions, 1 per arm. Harry, fucking great.
Yeah, that can be a fun one too.
Yeah. And as much as I complain about the new Vecna stat block, I do love the fact that he's got just got, you know, a million zillion reactions and, you know, all that, and you're like, fucking goddamn.
Yeah, even basic shit like, oh, when this monster is attacked, they can attack back in response with their reaction. Like, that's good for like lower level enemies that are still like, oh shit, like these guys are more dangerous than normal, because just because it's my turn doesn't mean I'm safe. You know what I mean? That's a big part of it. Like, oh, my turn is not, because normally your turn, you're 100% safe. You're like, nothing's going to happen to me on my turn. But if you start throwing in legendary actions or weird reaction abilities, all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I have to consider that.
And then there are also creatures that have like auras or like an effect where if you hit them, you suffer consequences of something. Right. Like, I think it's the Venom Troll, where it's like if you deal damage to it or slashing damage, you get burned for acid damage for every hit.
Yeah, because he's covered in acidy pimples.
Or what's the Ice Toad? There's, I guess, way before the Tyranny of Dragons bundle book, Horde of the Dragon Queen, the number one encounter that kept killing people was this. It's like a CR3 creature. It's called an Ice Toad, and it just had this cold aura around it, and it just murdered parties, and everyone complained about it. And I don't know if they got rid of the encounter or they changed it, but I think in the newer updated version of Tyranny of Dragons, they tweaked it or they fixed the encounter so maybe there's not as many of the ice frogs. I don't know.
I'm not familiar with that particular example, but it's not. It sounds like something that would happen. I mean, the crux of all those examples you just mentioned, though, Matt, is the fact that those abilities disrupt the players' like plans, and the players have no choice but to respect what the bad guy can do. Like, you can't ignore the aura, you can't ignore their reaction abilities. Like, you have to consider it and deal with it, as opposed to beating up on a skeleton where you could just like dunk on that nerd and then move on with your day, and you don't have to like give a shit about what he can or can't do. Fucking Skelly boys.
Skelly boys.
Skelly boys.
This has nothing to do with anything, but I've been playing a lot of Tiny Tina's with my buddy, and all the skeleton enemies they're just doing a Skeletor voice.
Nice.
It's so hilarious. They're like, nah, my one weakness.
love
Dang, He-Man. You're like, fuck. Love this guy.
All skeletons are Skeletor. Confirmed.
Yeah. It's so great.
I like it.
I approve.
I like it. I do approve of this.
If your skeleton doesn't say "Rattle 'em boys" at the start of every
Rattle 'em boys.
combat, then I can't help you. Sorry, we just can't be friends.
I understand.
Rattle 'em boys.
Oh, did I tell you guys that in the Icewind Dale game, because I was doing the Lich Warlock thing, every time I went into my form of dread, I turned I had the skeleton face, so I kept just doing the Skeletor voice. Like I went from like normal, just like knockoff fantasy English voice to yeah, face me, Eldritch Blast, and my friends were like, "What the fuck?" Like, Matt, what is wrong with your character?
I can perfectly picture you doing it too, and I hate it.
I got real good at it.
I'm sure you did. I believe that 100%.
Hey, man.
It fucking so I watched for a while the Project Mouthwash actual plays. The guys who did like Sword Art Abridged, and the guy who does Kirito in Sword Art Abridged was he was a blood hunter or something. And every time he would like Mr. Hide out, he just starts screaming at people with a really thick Scottish accent. And like it's like unintelligible because of the way his voice sounds. And you're like, bro, I don't understand what you're saying.
I love that so much.
God damn it.
I see.
Anyways, Josh, what were you saying?
So yeah, the next one I have jotted down here. And this one, I don't have this one's a little hard to come up with a specific example for, but the idea of giving your enemies, giving your bad guys abilities that really push against and challenge the player's abilities, so that they can't always just rely on the same thing all the time, you know? So like, you know, the most basic and obvious example is, giving the bad guy counterspell so the wizard can't just reliably use the same spells that they do over and over, like the same spells that they always use in every combat to win, you know what I mean? Like, that's the really basic example. But anything that sort of forces it so the players have to rethink what the tactics of the scenario is. You know, like imagine, for example, or another good example, your paladin, Sam, who's going around and divine smiting for 120 damage a round or whatever.
Hey.
They run into an enemy who's immune to radiant damage. All of a sudden, your paladin goes, "Oh wait, oh no, I have to rethink this scenario now."
It would have been even funnier if they healed from the radiant damage.
Or they heal for that's evil.
God.
They heal
There's some
from the
monsters that
radiant
do that
damage.
where they take a certain damage type and you're like,
Yes.
I don't like this at all.
Yeah, the fucking the giant that we fought, the thing that Josh called Talos heals when it takes fire damage.
Yeah.
I was in a game where they were like the final boss is like a giant evil phoenix. And the GM was like, okay, you can control a monster of this CR or lower, and that was within that CR range. It was just like right on the cusp. And a part of me was like, do I do this? Do I act like this much of an asshole? Do I throw a thing that heals from fire at the giant phoenix? Am I gonna be that fucking guy? I didn't, but I was fucking close, let me tell you.
That's the opposite of what I'm talking about. That's your players finding a very specific exploitable loophole and just pounding it into the dirt.
Oh no, for sure. It was just I just sat there being like, do I do it?
Yes, that would be funny. And you know, it also worth pointing out that the challenging the player's abilities might not always be obvious. Like another good one is particularly when my players are fighting the Ancient Sapphire Dragon, Sam's character, who's a paladin, didn't have any kind of ranged options. So the dragon was constantly flying away, teleporting away, getting out of range, so Sam could not smite him. So at a certain point, Sam started doing some pretty wild and shit to try and get the smites off on that dragon.
Yeah.
One of which
including
involved,
to getting alley-oop tossed at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Another one which involved dimension dooring onto the dragon's back. And then also
Sit up on the Hydra's back.
my favorite one was the way that Sam killed the dragon was that because Ant's character is a rune knight and he did the bigger eyes ability. So Sam
Rise.
goes, all right, how tall is Kai? And I was like, he's probably like 10 feet tall or close to it. And he goes, can I climb onto his back? And I was like, yeah. He goes, cool. How high is the dragon? I was like 60 feet up. He's like, from Kai's back, can I jump and then misty step onto the dragon? I was like, yeah, I think that would work. So Sam leapt off the giant turtle man, misty steps onto the dragon, and then divine smited it in the face for the kill.
Yeah.
And that kind of
Good
shit,
time.
the only reason that kind of thing that even happened was because the dragon was outside of range and Sam had no choice but to come up with a different strategy.
Yep.
So that's the kind of thing where I mean, that's what I mean when I say like sort of challenging your players or pushing against your players' abilities, particularly if they have an ability that they use all the goddamn time, right? Like if your wizard is really fucking fireball happy, suddenly you're fighting some Afridi. You know what I mean? And that's again, that's a really like simplistic example, but you know, it does the job.
It's more interesting too when you think like of challenging a player, like what they do a lot or based on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. Sometimes you want to make an encounter, attacking the player's weaknesses, but if it's constant, it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be annoying. But if you challenge their strengths, so let's say the wizard who's constantly casting fireball, and now they're fighting an Afridi, and it's like, well, that's my whole shtick.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's not dunking on it's not like dunking on the area that they have a hard time with. It's like taking away the old reliable and forcing you to think in different ways. And it is sometimes, you're right, you can sometimes target a particular weakness like, oh, the barbarian has a low int score, let's throw some mind flayers at him. But yeah, you can only do that so much until it just turns into bullying.
Yeah.
Like,
you know what's interesting? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Sam.
No, that's fine.
I thought about how to do this because I was deep diving into my Metal Gear lore, as you do. Every few weeks.
understandable.
You're just,
Yeah.
reimburse myself with the monument.
Metal
that is
Gear has
Metal
lore?
Gear. Oh, buddy.
oh, buddy, does it have
I
lore?
wanted to say that. I'm sorry.
Oh, Betty, does Metal
So
Gear
it
have
actually
lore?
started with the Patriots.
I'm really wondering where this. All right, Isaiah, where are we going on this train? I'm getting on for the ride.
In Metal Gear Solid 5, the game will adjust its enemy patterns based on the way that you play.
Okay.
So if you get a lot of headshots, the enemies will start wearing helmets.
Oh.
If you use a lot of close quarter shotguns, they start using riot shields. If you use a lot of like stealth, like the only way to not get caught is the only way to not have them evolve is to knock them out and make sure that no one finds the body so they can't learn.
Oh,
So I like the idea of let's say you're like a super cool special mercenary company fighting like the evil organization
The Black
or
Company,
the kingdom,
you might
whatever the
say.
fuck. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, the wizards are like clapping cheeks. And then it's like, okay, well, every commander and that you get jumped by is a mage slayer now.
Right.
The rogue uses like the shadow monk will use his like sneak power, and then maybe the like wizard that ambushes you in every fight
always
has
have
daylight to just blast the fucking area. Or maybe it's not that it always happens, but now there's always a chance that
it's
it could happen.
Concern.
Yeah. I think I'm not sure how I would find the very delicate balance for that, but it would be an interesting thing I'd like to explore.
I mean, something like that, I think it works fine as long as you adhere to the verisimilitude. I think it works fine in the sense that, the bad guy, I was about to make another black company reference, but the bad guy army keeps you keep fighting them over and over again, and because of that, all of the survivors are bringing back information to the generals are then responding to the situation. So anytime you run into the bad guy army, that like, all right, they have information on us, they're probably gonna fuck with our tactics. I think as long as that sort of that air of verisimilitude holds up, it's fine. The spot where it becomes a dick move is the thing where it's like, oh, the wizard uses fireball all the time, so all of the bad guy army, like some of the elite generals, start making fire resistant armor. You're like, okay. And then you go off and fight some goblins in a cave, and the goblins also conveniently have fire resistant armor, at which point you go, wait a minute. And then you go into another cave, and conveniently you fight a red dragon. And only red dragons. In fact, there are no other dragons. Red dragons are the only dragons that exist. At which point the player goes, all right, wait, hold on now.
It says here on the treasure map there's supposed to be 3 green dragons in this lair. It's a swamp cave.
Yeah, they're reddish green. They're reddish green swamp dragons. They're like,
looks that picture hard.
Yeah. you do the Family Guy thing where you hold up the color swatch. You're like, wait a minute. Fucking Christ. But God, it's like, yeah, if it makes sense for that specific kind of enemy to have a specific sort of information, and ergo they have like the sort of tactical like advantage, or not even advantage, but like tactical defense, you're like, yeah, that checks out. But if the random kobolds in the random cave all happen to know that your fucking wizard uses fireball, and all devise a way to make themselves like cover themselves in fire resistant like liquids or some shit, it's like, all right, now you're just being an asshole.
No, I think they should do the opposite. Every kobold is covered in oil.
They're all covered in cooking oil.
Yeah, you walk into the kobold cave. They're in the middle of a pitch black cave, and like, what are you doing? It's like, we're sunbathing. Like, you're what? Yeah, we're sunbathing.
They're all greased up.
Yeah, your wizard's just like, you know what? I'm not dealing with this shit today. And just fucking fireballs them.
Fireballs them. The entire cave lights up like a fireworks show.
Yeah,
everyone does. The party, the kobolds, everyone.
I keep doing these unrelated tangents. I've thought about a million different ways to have like side quests in a fantasy 5e game that's just about kobolds being the biggest fucking idiots around.
I mean, that's just kobolds.
Yeah, like like one of my favorite ones is the Madagascar 2. All the chimps want to go on maternity leave, and then Skipper's like, but you're all males. They're like, yeah, and it's like, you obviously don't understand how this concept works.
You know the reverse trap builder dungeon that always happens? It's like a very funny thing where it's like an engineer will build an entire like dungeon hallway filled with booby traps and pit traps and all this stuff, but they built it backwards. So from the end of the dungeon to the entrance. And so when your players arrive, they're like, he's like, hey, so me, Kobold, I built this entire elaborate, protection system, security system for my home. Unfortunately, I built it from the inside out, and now I'm trapped and I can't get in my home. Could you please?
he can't get back into his home.
Hey, could you please go through my my home and activate all my booby traps so I can get back in?
Oh, that's not what I thought you meant initially.
It's so good.
He's just standing outside the dungeon. He's like, yeah, I can't get back in my house. I made too many good traps. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
I know where
Everything
every
is
key
the
down.
The bees.
They're not even tiny bees. They're just very large bees.
Just a
Like base
hallway filled
basketball
with giant
size.
wasps.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, what do you do for the environment, Hornets? I just like to hurt people. Oh,
Oh, that's kind of fucked up.
Damn.
Yeah, and
It's like I do love the idea of a world where every side quest, like kobolds are like Nurse Joy. They're just fucking everywhere for some reason. Every side quest you ever potentially pick up is always from a kobold, and it always
No
makes
matter
no
how.
goddamn sense.
I really like the idea that the kobold, it didn't intend for the problem to arise. It's just, kobold just did some fucking thing.
Yeah, kobold just did some shit.
They just did some shit, and then it caused, like, I don't know, a volcano to erupt, and they went, oh, fuck, and they just ran away.
Yeah.
We wanted to see how many kobolds can cast fireball at the same time. Let me tell you, it's a lot. It doesn't go well. It's like, oh, yeah, really? Is that what you figured out? Fantastic.
And you just like, even in places where it makes no sense to find kobolds, you find more kobolds, and you're like, how do you guys keep getting around? And they're like, don't worry about it.
I don't know why that just reminded me of the three kobolds in a trench coat in, like, a tundra scenario.
oh, that's a nice one. Yeah, we met them. They're so funny.
It's like, why are you here? You are cold-blooded. Go home.
Yeah.
There's so many kobolds in the north. I don't get it.
Yeah, where are you? How do you all survive?
Oh my god.
How the fuck do you all live here? I don't know.
You're all cold blood. I just want to see a trail of fucking kobolds
Dead kobolds.
that go back miles. And they're like, yeah, well, there was a lot of us before. There's like 3 left. You're like, oh no.
We're huddling for warmth. This coat is all we have that's keeping us from an untimely death.
They just
God
all
damn it.
got themselves killed. Jesus
I
Christ.
could see it. 10 out of 10.
Fucking Christ, I love kobolds.
They are probably the best race in 5e.
I just like to imagine them like thinking like, yes, everyone says south for the winter is warmer. Nah, north.
Kobolds
They got
go
it all
north.
wrong. We gotta go north for warmth.
Yeah, we gotta think about it. If we go north, nobody will be up there. We get the whole place to ourselves.
Also, north means closest to the sun.
Yeah, that's what it would be. That's the rationale. North means closer to the sun. That's exactly what the
kobolds.
rationale would be. And then they get up there and they just find a bunch of Goliaths and they're like, oh no, we've miscalculated. Oops. Oh, fuck.
I really want someone to run an all kobold campaign.
All kobolds, only
Yeah.
kobolds.
Yeah.
Everyone is
There's-
kobolds.
Even the NPCs, all kobolds.
Yeah,
the big
everyone's
bad
kobolds.
kobolds.
Yeah, like the
Every
whole
enemy
game
you
is just
fight
that you're,
is just
yeah, you're just like a fucking cohort of kobolds trying to survive. Trying not to kill yourselves.
How long's it been? 11 days.
11 days.
oh,
How
no.
old do kobolds usually live? 11 days. Oh no.
Oh my god.
All I'm hearing is that the campaign can only last 11 days.
Yeah, 11 sessions.
Yeah.
You have to survive for 11 sessions.
That's all you get.
And then the world just ends.
Yeah, you just,
Good luck.
you just die anyway. You get eaten by a dragon. Holy
Hey
fuck.
guys, we made it to the end of the 11th session. What happens now? Heart attacks. All of you.
All the kobolds have heart attacks.
At the same time.
And then they get fed to Thumberchod.
Yes.
Oh my god, I want to put Thumberchod in a game so bad. Thumberchod, I always forget how to say his name. Doesn't matter. Fat dragon.
Here, apparently Wizards of the Coast
Big
didn't
boy.
want him to be in the movie, but the director's like, no, we need Chungus.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's-
Why would they say no to that?
Yeah, that
Right
movie
now.
would be about at least 30% less like
Yeah, what the
entertaining.
fuck? That was one
I
of
don't
the
know.
best
Thick Boy
scenes.
McGee
Fucking Thumberchod sliding down
rolling.
the mountain of skeletons. That was an amazing scene. What the fuck? Oh my god.
Fantastic.
I thought it was so funny too, looking up looking up that fucking dragon afterward and then finding out that him not being able to breathe fire all the time is because he's obese.
Yeah.
That's like an actual canon thing, is he has a hard time breathing fire because he's too fat. Oh.
It's just look, he's just a thick boy, okay?
Yeah, he is. He is indeed a thick lad. Oh my god. All right. Where's my brain at? Okay. So, we talked a little bit about the map stuff. We mentioned, enemies having sort of off-turn actions, a la, your sort of Dark Souls vibe. You have to respect what the bad guy is doing. We talked about enemies having abilities and powers that sort of challenge and push against the player's strengths and maybe sometimes weaknesses. And also, side note, Matt, that's when you mentioned the types of monsters matter. I was kind of thinking about that in relation to the challenging player abilities. Different monsters challenging player abilities in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the real big one I wanted to hit on. And this is not a... you would be going outside the rules for the most part with this idea, sorta. So I had a thought that was spurred. Well, no, okay. Let me backtrack. So I was watching a video from Dale Kingsmill forever ago. Not that long ago, maybe a year ago. And she was talking about making a fight with a dragon in D&D more interesting. I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. What you got for me? And now what she said is she goes, I don't think the dragon's breath weapon should have a recharge on it. And then she goes, pause. Let me cook. Not literally, but she was like, bear with me here. And what she was basically saying is, again, to use the Dark Souls comparison, a lot of games, like a lot of video games, Monster Hunter does this absolute fuckload. When you're being threatened by the monster, they do a huge telegraph that you have to respond to. And if you don't respond to the big telegraph, you get fucking dunked on, right? So what she was saying is, rather than the dragon having a recharge on their breath weapon, she's like, what if it's just the dragon telegraphs when they're going to use their breath weapon, and then the players have to respond. So, for example, the players are fighting the dragon, and then when the dragon's gonna do their breath weapon their next turn, you see their whole throat starts to light up and glow with fire on the inside. And so as a player, okay, the dragon's about to use their breath weapon. So I either have to tank it and not give a shit and just keep hitting the dragon, or I have to try and get to cover, or maybe I could try and throw out a spell to clamp his mouth shut and stop him or something like that. You fucking, Bigby's hand to hold the dragon's mouth shut. Like the idea, and again, I say Dark Souls, right? Because a big thing with Dark Souls is how do you dodge the ability? Well, because the enemy almost always does a big crazy telegraph before they start swinging at you. And I got to think, I was like, having enemies telegraph their really deadly attacks, I think could be a really cool way to add a lot of tension and really spice up the sort of tactical side of combat in tabletop. The dragon is going to charge up their breath weapon at the end of their turn, so once it gets back around to his turn, we're all getting hit with the fire. So either we have to ignore it and accept the damage, or we have to do something about it. And I think particularly another thing that you got to do is, if you're going to have these, because it's not a video game and things aren't moving in real time, you have to sort of adjust the strategy a little bit. So if you have enemies telegraph the big attack, you also probably want it to be way more deadly than normal, So it's like, oh, dragon's going to breath weapon us, and normally it's 10d6, but now it's 20d6 or something like that. You know what I mean? You want to make it way more deadly, because the telegraphing part means that generally, players are going to try and avoid it. But if they don't, you give them the fucking bully beatdown.
So I agree with the you could be able to make it more deadly. The thing that I would need to see from it as well is I would want more codified ways to deal with it. So you brought up like the whole use Big B's hand to keep its mouth shut. I feel like I would want stuff to go with that to sort of reinforce the fiction,
Yeah, well, so that's why I said you'd be kind of operating it like if you were doing it in a current, if you were making your own game, obviously different story. But yes, if you were doing it in your current game, you would have to operate in the nebulous zone in terms of the rules a little bit to allow for these kind of response. Because you're right, your players have to have multiple avenues of response. Because this is really the thing, right? The thing that tends to make any kind of tabletop game with an emphasis on like a tactical style of combat, what tends to make the game boring and what you'll notice we've been with every point I've hit here is a way to break up this problem is things getting monotonous and doing the same thing over and over. So if you don't give your players multiple avenues to deal with the telegraphed attack, then what they're going to do is just deal with it the same way over and over and over again. And then it goes from being interesting to back to being boring, and you're back at square one because they're just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's really the thing we're trying to avoid, right? We're trying to avoid you just doing A to B to C every single turn. So yes, you definitely have to sort of, you could, I suppose if you wanted, you could take the time to write down multiple different rules about how you could handle it, but I think probably for me, my strat would basically be, inform the players, like this is how this is gonna work, and then tell them, any kind of potential crazy idea you might have to try and circumnavigate the problem, I am open to, and you just kind of do the back and forth a little bit. Because I don't see a way to eat, like it's doable, I'm sure, but I don't see an easy stress-free way of really codifying that sort of thing, So I think just doing it kind of on a case by case would be the best way.
It is definitely one of those situations where there are just too many options.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables.
Properly codified. It's the reason why those things don't work in video games is because you would have to design a scenario,
so many hypotheticals,
every hypothetical possible. Yeah. And then if you don't do that and a player goes, well, why can't I do this? A lot of the time they get frustrated because you're like, oh, why can't I stop the attack by doing this? That's where
that's the strength of tabletop.
Yeah, I was going to say that the ability to make case by case bases and go, oh, okay, this is how this works. Because, as much as I love playing video games, there are definitely times where I'm like, well, why can't I do this?
Work? Yeah.
Why doesn't this work? Why doesn't that work? And it's because, well, they didn't make the game with that intention.
Yeah, they didn't code that in with that in mind.
Like one of the instances that especially frustrates people in general is like when you're playing any kind of game and you see a knee-high fence and your character goes, I can't go over that. God.
Yeah.
This isn't something I can do.
Fence too tall.
Too fucking high.
Fence too tall. Fence too strong. Can't jump.
Yeah.
Me no jump. Me no jump over.
I have bad knees. I can't jump. Video game. Kratos has bad knees.
Yeah.
Oh, now I just reminded of the firewall in Conan Exile. I mean, it looks pretty dangerous, but I don't know, guys. Let's try it.
Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? We try to walk.
Dies.
That was awful.
All my items. Oof.
The fact that the kill plane goes even further beyond the ground is very funny.
All the way down and all the way up. Yeah, it goes fucking far.
Are you more mad of the fence or are you more mad of the firewall? Like, which would you rather have? Like, if they could, like, all video games.
Oh, if I have to choose one or the other? No, give me the fence.
Okay.
Give me the fence. Because if I get to the fence and I can't move past it, I go, all right, I'm satisfied now.
It's just kind of a thing that exists now.
Yeah. If I move up to the firewall and I look at it and go, there's a chance? Maybe?
It's too ambiguous. I do have to say that the idea of someone going, you know, that firewall looks pretty dangerous, but I bet I could survive that.
Yeah. Well, it's like,
it's just so funny.
Like, does it insta kill me or does it just damage me over time?
I could break
that's
those
the
cuffs
question.
level
No,
nonsense.
that's exactly the question, Matt. Does it insta kill me or does it damage me over time? I have to find out. That's the question. That's
when
absolutely
you throw
the
your
question.
shit to the ground and then run through instead
Yes.
of fucking walking through with all of your
No, because
shit.
I remember specifically when we were playing Conan, that was exactly the thought I had, where I looked at it and I was like, can I move past it? I'm not sure.
It was really funny being AFK from the chat and seeing it all go down though. Me being like, oh, that's a kill plane.
Yep.
Walks through. You shouldn't have done that.
No, I should not have. The idea I was kind of thinking of is like when you're playing a game like Yakuza and you get into a fight and it's like,
Oh my
oh yeah,
God.
you can pick up the bike and hit somebody with it, but I can't pick up this like food sign. You're like, why not?
Yeah.
It was like they just didn't think about it.
Didn't think about it. Didn't want that item to be destructible.
Yeah.
Like it's so at least with the newer Yakuza games, you know, all of the items that you as a player can interact with in a fight are like they have physics attached to them
Yeah.
in the overworld. So like that makes more sense because you're like, oh, they didn't want to throw all of this, like they didn't want to do that with
All
this.
the art design
I
they
get
didn't
it,
want
I
to just
get
throw
it.
out the window by you running
Yeah,
through
yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Like that makes sense. Oh God, I think the worst thing with Yakuza is like, oh man, that I just shot that man several times in the chest. He is fucking dead, and then he just
Gets
walks
up.
away.
He's like,
after the
I'm
fight.
good, bro. And you're like, oh, okay.
What-
All right.
There is no suspension of disbelief. with
Yeah, you're
that
just
one.
standing there like, I don't know about this one, but
I killed that man. I cut that man in half. I shot that man repeatedly. I just gave that man many concussions.
slams
people
head
should
in
be
door
walking.
frame. I think
Like-
he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. In relation to the dragon thing, I will say I do think saying that the dragon doesn't have any breath weapon recharge, I'm like, I think that's a little too far. But I do think the idea of giving them a higher chance, so like instead of a 5 and a 6, making it a 4, 5 and a 6, or a 3, 4, 5 and a 6, you know, giving them a higher chance to recharge their breath weapon, but every time they use it, they're going to telegraph the attack. I think that could totally be done.
You could also treat it like a pseudo legendary action, layer action, where it's like, all right, on initiative count 20, it starts to show that, hey
starts to
guys,
breathe.
it's
Yeah.
it starts, this neck is glowing, it's is inhaling, and then on initiative count 10, it breathes the fire, or whatever.
And also,
So it telegraphs it, or like initiative 20, and you have 10
Right.
returns to,
yeah, you have until initiative 10. Yeah, so it's like a layer
Yeah,
action almost. Yeah, you could do that too. Yeah, it's like because I think the reason I think this could be a potentially like really cool idea that with like lots of like, and the reason I think that this could really spice things up is because you can do. I've said this before, where you can do really like wacky woohoo shit in a game as long as your players have the information to be able to respond to it. You know what I mean? Like, the reason something like a potion of death in older editions is shitty is because there's absolutely zero way for you to have any fucking clue whether it is or is not a potion of, like, there's no amount of information you could potentially get to clue you in. You can't hedge your bets in any way, right? Whereas if, like, when you pick up the potion, if the player says, I look at the potion, and then the GM says, you notice that the bottom of the potion is slightly discolored. The player goes, okay, that's weird. And then now the player at least has a little bit of information to go, this could potentially be bad. Whereas if they just pick up the potion and it looks like a normal potion, and then they drink it, and then you say, cool, make a death save, and they go, what? You know what I mean? And I literally watched that happen in actual play, by the way.
Wasn't there that green text meme where it's like, player, it's like, all right, I grabbed the deadly potion off the wall and I drink it. DM, how do you know it's deadly poison? Oh, you're right. I drink it anyways. Okay. Make me a death save. It's just like, fuck.
I have not seen that green text, but I would believe that, yes.
Pretty great.
You know, it's the thing where it's like, yeah, you can have really crazy monster like abilities and powers as long as there's some kind of information. You know, like for example, a big thing. I was trying to think about if any games I knew had this idea of like telegraphing attacks in the way that video games do. Like, I mean, you want the king of this example, go play Monster Hunter. Like, this is the entire premise of Monster Hunter, is the big telegraphic attacks and what you have to do in response. And what I realized is it's not exactly the same, but everyone take a shot. Dungeon World kind of has a thing like this.
Oh my god, he did it!
I did the thing. Because Dungeon World, you know, and I think this move is in a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, as far as I'm aware. But there's a move that the GM does called announce future badness. At least that's how Dungeon World phrases it. I forget how Apocalypse World phrases it, but it's a similar idea. And it's the idea of like, let the players know bad shit's about to happen, and then give them time to respond. You know, because in a video game, you have visual cues, but in a tabletop game, you don't. So you need to indicate to the player somehow. So like an example of announcing future badness would be the ranger player walks out into a small clearing, you know, in the forest, and then the GM says, "Hey, ranger player, you hear a noise up above you, and you look up and you see the glint of something shiny coming from the trees. What do you do?" And the ranger player goes, "Oh fuck, that's probably someone about to shoot my ass with an arrow." I dive into the nearest bush, and then you know, make a roll or whatever. You succeed, and the GM goes, "Cool." You dive into the nearest bush, and an arrow flies past and hits the ground right where you're standing, and you hear the cackling of goblins. You know, and it's like, if that player had stood there, the GM would be entirely in their right to just fill the fucking ranger player with arrows. Like, you know, maybe there was like 4 or 5 goblins up in the trees, and they just riddle your ass like a pincushion because you told the player, you gave them the warning, and they chose to ignore it or not do anything about it. It's the same. And I think I feel like this is a doable. Like, I don't feel like this is so out there that it would be hard to do in D&D. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's totally a possible, like, it's a reasonable thing to like execute on. I don't know. Am I not thinking of something maybe?
No, I mean, I think if you give your players fair warning and you sort of from the get, oh no, I'm yawning.
Oh no, he's
sorry.
dead.
If you from the get-go say, like, you know, you will be rewarded for quick thinking and potentially punished if you freeze up or you aren't paying attention, and then you enact the thing that you say you're going to do. Yeah, I think you're chill.
Yeah, it's that yeah, it's also an expectation thing too, right? A game like Dungeon World sets up that expectation by having the existence of that move, right? The fact that GM move exists sets up the expectation that, like, oh, okay, this is a thing that will happen. So yeah, in a game that doesn't explicitly say it, you'll have to say it a little bit more up front. I do think it's also worth pointing out, this just popped in my head now. You also don't necessarily want to do it all the time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think is true of a lot of things, right? Doing pretty much anything too much gets monotonous. But, you know, if you imagine, if we take the Dark Souls comparison, if you imagine that every single enemy you ever run into has giant fuck off crazy big telegraphed attacks that you have to dodge or block in some fashion, like every single enemy you ever meet, right? Or what was the turtle warriors in Dark Souls 2? Those dudes?
Oh yeah,
with the big mallets. Yeah. If every single enemy was like the Turtle Knights, where you basically had to wait for them to finish their big swing fuck you bullshit because of how thick and how much poise those dudes had. If every enemy worked like that, it would be awful, right? Like at a certain point, you'd be like, this is annoying.
I'm just having a bad time.
Yeah, right? It'd be a bad time. But if you if you know what enemies do or don't do that, then you go, okay, I know when I do or don't need to think about this particular problem. And Dark Souls does a particularly good job of this, or Soulsborne in general, where if there's an enemy that you're going to have to respond in such a fashion where you sort of need to deal with their big attacks and you can't just sort of like attack your way through them, generally something about the enemy's visual design will tell you that, right? You walk up to the Turtle Knights in Dark Souls 2, they're fucking massive, they're covered entirely in armor, and they have a huge fuck off mace. And you look at those guys and you go, I probably can't just go swing and kill that. I probably am gonna have to deal with that whole big fuck off mace situation, you know?
Yeah, and I think a good one. I think that the Turtle Knights are even more successful than you say because they have a big shell. You go, I probably can't backstab them because they have a big ass shell, and then you can't actually backstab them.
You cannot backstab them. That's true. I forgot about the big shell. Now that particular part of it is a little trickier in D&D or any sort of tabletop scenario because it's not. You know, you're gonna have to, because you don't have 100% clear of visuals design wise. You'll have to sort of describe or explain, or you'll have to take a different tact, which I don't even know. That would definitely will be harder, and there will be certain times where it's like, oh, like for example, the troll in 5e has like an optional ability where if you do a certain amount of damage to them, and then you can like roll a die to see if you like cut an arm off or something, and then the arm is sentient because it's a troll, and the arm can like attack you as a separate creature. I don't really know how you would like indicate that to a player. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing about them visually that would tell you that. It's like kind of an old mythology thing. So there's that part, but you know, it's a little trickier.
Yeah, for the troll, you'd have to. I'm a big not aggregate. What's the word?
Advocate. God, dude, I'm struggling. Brain no worky.
Understand.
I'm a big advocate for setting the scene before the fight. There are definitely times where you just drop your party into a fight and don't give them a chance to think about it. Just be like, it's happening now. But at other times, like the big monster fights, always good for set dressing. If you show like, this troll is fighting like a salamander, and the salamander rips that's fire, maybe it doesn't work, but yeah, like, fucking whatever. The Grey Render rips the troll's arm off, and then like the clawed hand comes up and starts choking puts the Grey Render in the rear naked choke. And then he just starts fucking two-timing the fucking Grey Render with himself, and you're like, oh no, wombo combo. Like, your players will go, oh, I see.
Yeah. You can indicate it via shit that's occurring. Yeah, something weird happens or whatever. Or I mean,
they could be like stumbling onto its lair, and then the troll just like is in the middle of reattaching its arm.
Yeah, that's
just
true.
like, huh?
Yeah, it's totally, it's definitely doable. Yeah, you just need to plan ahead a little bit more. Some of them are easy, right? Like the Dragon Breath one. If your players see the dragon's throat start to glow, pretty much everyone's going to be like, oh, that's a fire breath. Right?
Same thing with like a mind flare, like mind blast. You could just indicate their brain is starting to glow.
Their brain glows and their tentacles start to wisp, like float up in the air. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, oh shit. You see like weird invisible sonic lines around their head, and you're like, oh fuck. No.
Yeah. And another thing too is, because I know, Matt, you mentioned this forever ago. I don't even remember what context you were talking about this in, but you mentioned how in your game your players pick up on like the fact that you have kind of like a coded vocabulary to tell them certain things.
Yeah.
And this would be kind of a similar thing where if you have enemies do these big telegraph abilities, if you do that early on in the campaign and you do that consistently, at a certain point it doesn't really matter what you describe. If you describe the monster doing something weird at the end of their turn, instinctively your players are going to go, oh, he's about to hit us with something. We have to respond. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because they'll have learned over time, like, oh, that's something we have to pay attention to. The first time you do it, they go, that's weird. The second time they go, okay, maybe that's the thing. The third time they go, oh, this is a trend, right? You build up that like sort of lexicon of style of play. I don't know. Yeah, lexicon of gameplay. Yeah, I guess that's the way I would phrase it. Sam, do you have any thoughts to add on that, on the whole thing?
Not really.
Huh?
No, I've just been kind of patiently listening because my brain is kind of melted. I'm gonna be honest. I have a long day. So,
I mean, do you generally agree with the concept? You a yay or nay on it?
yes.
Yes.
Tentatively.
Tentatively, yes. Why tentatively?
Because I'm gone. I'm gonna be honest. Listen, I remember it's real smooth. I remember coming at like brain tuning out and around talking about how you would basically advertise to your players that something is like different about an encounter. So like that's what I'm going off of.
Okay, yeah.
Unless something else has happened.
No, yeah, I'm talking about the sort of the Monster Hunter thing, the big telegraph to advertise big problem. The Rathalos flies up.
I wasn't gone for that long.
No,
thank God.
No, yeah, you got the gist. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no. I okay. So yes, I do think telegraphs are good. I do think that they have to be handled carefully though, because like I literally when we started talking about this, the reason why I was so quiet was I was just thinking about the different ways that you could handle specifically like how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So like you could say, you know, at the top of the round they start to telegraph, and at the end of the round they do it, or the beginning of their turn, and then at the end of the round. And I was like, well, if it's at the end of the round, their turn starts, you know, later, some players are just fucked because big old middle finger.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. You know, I was just thinking more about balance.
Definitely, for that particular, my train of thought was definitely that it probably most of the time it would work as a enemy does indicator at the end of their round, does the ability at the start of their next, or end of their turn, does the ability at the start of their next turn. I think that's generally where my thought was.
I think that's probably one of the best ways to do it, unless you do it at the top of the round or the end of the round.
Yeah, to make sure everyone has gone. Yeah.
Yeah, just a way to make sure that everybody else has a turn.
Right. Everyone has to have a response. Yeah, you can't you can't do the thing where the enemy does something and two players get to respond and then the other two just get fucked.
Yeah.
Fair. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean it, and also something that's always great about doing homebrew shit in your own games is you don't need to worry if it works for anyone else. It only needs to work for your table.
Yep.
So you could just do that shit on the fly.
True. I think that is a fading real observation nowadays, where it's like
shit only needs to work for your table.
Yeah. Because you know we've had this talk a lot, where it's like someone's like, oh, that's not going to work. And it's like, it worked for me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think a lot of people are just go, well, it didn't work for me, so it can't work. It's impossible. It's like, well, that's just not true. Like. Maybe you didn't like use it in the right context, or maybe the you know your specific players are not conducive to that. But to say like it'll never work, it's like I don't know about that. But
I think that mentality or that habit that a lot of people are in has kind of come about because of the internet, because we're all able to intercommunicate so quickly. Like you can have a bad session, post it on Reddit, get a response from someone else in 5 to 10 minutes, right? So it's like, because you're able to like easily intercommunicate and everything so quickly, and you're able to like absorb or throw out information so fast, you get in this situation where somebody goes, oh, yeah, that thing you're talking about, I tried it, doesn't work, you know? And like and it's just so easy to do and say that like you sort of ignore all the other potential possibilities. And also because of the way people talk about tabletop in general these days, and because there's so much more discussion, again because of the internet, you end up in this kind of funny scenario where everybody's trying to homogenize how they play the game, because if you homogenize how you play the game, then it becomes easier to have the discussion with each other because we're all sort of on the same page. But in actuality, that's not reasonable or doable. It's just like a weird instinct I think a lot of people have, or like a subconscious desire, you know? Because it's true where something you'd be like, oh, this thing didn't work for my table. And then someone could respond, well, my players don't give a shit about that aspect of the game, so it worked fine for me, you know? Because that's a big part of it. There'll be a lot of games where it's like, oh, this spell is really overpowered because of X, Y, and Z situation. And then someone else responds, it's like, well, nobody used or gave a shit about that spell at my table, so it was actually kind of worthless, you know?
Yeah, there's that. It's. I had a few situations where, like specifically playing in Cardell's game, like, you know, most of us were casters, but very few of us used Counterspell, and even then, like, we didn't use, like, even when there was enemy casters, we didn't really use Counterspell that often. If it was like he's gonna fucking Finger of Death, it's like, yeah, no, not doing that one, bud, fuck you. But like, if he's gonna just like hit you with a fireball, I'm like, I got a Ring of Evasion. You know what I mean? Like,
certain things take priority. It's kind of like how in competitive games. All right, everybody take another shot. Josh is bringing up fighting games. It's a really common problem in fighting games where the grappler archetype will absolutely destroy noobs. Like new players, your Zangiefs, your Potemkins, your Hugos, your Android 16s will absolutely dunk nerds into the ground because they're new players, right? When in actuality, most of the time, not always, but often, grappler characters are like mid-tier at best. And when you get into the higher levels, nobody cares about the grappler character. Like no pro Guilty Gear player is afraid of Potemkin. Like they all know what they got to do. They might be afraid in a couple of specific scenarios, but overall they know what the strat is. And the reason for that is because your priorities and what you're focusing on and what you're doing and what you're learning as a new player are different than when you're a more experienced player. You know, you're learning and focusing on different things. So when you're a new player, the ridiculous things that you'll focus on will be like big damage, how much health, big long combo. And so you run into the grappler character, and you see that the grappler character could just absolutely shit out damage like nobody's business with relative ease, and you go, this is ridiculous. This character's OP as fuck. And it's like, well, no, it's not OP as fuck. It's just you don't know what your response is, or you're not focusing on how to deal with it yet because you haven't gotten to that point. And it's a very similar thing where certain tables, certain abilities, or certain D&D is infamous for this, where certain spells people will go, oh, this spell's really overpowered, and then someone else goes, no, it's not, that spell's trash, what are you talking about? And it's because whatever kind of game they were playing in player A's game, that spell was amazing and exactly what they needed all the time, and then in players B's game, the spell was fucking useless. You know, player A is playing a political intrigue fucking Game of Thrones game, so Zone of Truth is amazing. Player B is playing a dungeon fuckfest, and Zone of Truth is the most useless piece of spell slot you've ever seen in your life. You know? So it's totally like, it's totally the thing where some things work at your table that don't work at other tables, and you just gotta kind of figure that shit out. And you know, I'm sure and some things are gonna be more universal than others, just because that's how it be, basically. Like pretty much everyone agrees, like, yeah, Eldritch Blast, good pick, shit like that. Like certain things are gonna be more universal than others. But yeah, definitely player or table variability is a big factor with any kind of anything along these lines, spicing up combat, spicing up your fucking like your story, like anything. You got to take that shit into account. I mean, shit, if you're playing, you know, if you're doing entirely a theater of the mind game, different priorities on what makes a fight interesting. Although I do still think the big telegraphing attack thing works perfectly well in a theater of mind style game. I
mean, I think you could argue very easily that it works better there because players are already thinking about how to do things sort of ad hoc.
True.
You hear, it charges up its fire breath. They're like, okay. Versus someone who's really grid based, and it's like, well, I don't have the ability to do anything, so I can't do anything about this. And it's like, well, no, you can.
Yeah,
you can do it.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that, but yeah. Well, surprisingly, I got through all my points relatively quick this time. I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know why. Anybody have anything they want to add on the tail end there?
Let me think.
I like pretty maps.
Yes, pretty much.
Well,
Except for those fucking AI generated maps. Get that shit out of here.
Oh no, they started doing that.
Of course.
There's nothing sacred.
No.
That's
God damn it. I'm sorry. I was thinking like, no, guys, but you know what is sacred? Gundam.
Gundam.
I fucking love Gundam. No,
I fucking love Gundam.
No, I actually I was thinking about this while we were talking about the maps thing way back in the beginning. I couldn't find a good way to segue into it. An interesting way to do terrain in Roll20 maps is actually to fuck with walls, right? Like to do the dynamic lighting walls, but just make sure there's lighting everywhere. So like if you draw, for example, a thin little river pass with big walls, you can put the dynamic lighting walls around it so the players can't just fucking shoot themselves around, you know? You're literally funneling them into a place so they'll sort of see that and have to think about it differently.
Oh, you mean because you like physically can't move the token beyond the walls?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that goes into that's in the realm of like that's a situation where the map terrain situation is actually forcing some kind of tactic because you have no other choice.
Yeah, I think that'd be fucking sick. Actually, I might try that. Real shit.
real talk.
Get ready. I'm coming for
Matt said pretty maps. Sam, you got anything you want to throw on the end here?
Make anything to do with the terrain interesting, please. Don't like terrain can be very useful, you know, like funneling characters into a spot. Most players will go, oh, that's rough terrain, I ain't touching that shit.
Yeah, true. Yeah, rough terrain, suddenly
like,
you mean lava, and you're like, well, no, that's not what I said, but I guess.
Yep. Just do things with your terrain to like kind of get people to go into places, or be like, okay, well, I can reach this person, but I'm gonna have to go through the rough terrain. I'm gonna have to sprint because this is the only way to get to them at all. Just do things like that. Split, not. Okay, all right. When I say this, I do not mean like, in a dungeon split your party, but like if you can get the party to split in a combat zone, you can use that to your
move away from
too.
each other.
I brought this up.
Don't just turtle.
Fucking 12 ever ago, but when they fought the like Wendigo thing in the basement area that I had them running through, he used Wall of Thorns to just completely split them in half.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an effective way to ruin the rotation.
Yes, it ruins ruins the team rotation. Also,
I'm not sorry.
This falls under the terrain thing for the most part in my mind, but also use verticality.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like we get a lot of people get very in the like map is flat, so fight is flat, but use verticality. And I don't just mean enemies that can fly. We're also talking like balconies, ledges, and ladders.
Put those fucking archers up on a ledge. Do it.
Stairs. Like, I remember really early on in our campaign, my players got jumped on a city street, and there was a bunch of goblins shooting down from second floor windows at them. So they had to run up into the buildings to get at them. You know, like
Mhm.
verticality. That's an unsung hero, if you were, or maybe a forgotten hero.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely work. Oh, show.
For real, just like me.
Oh, real for real.
For real, on God. For real,
Not for play.
for real, on God, no cap. I think that's what the kids say these days.
The kids, yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm not a child.
Going to.
Oh wait, hold on.
These,
Yeah, hold
these
on.
eponymous kids, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta say. Yeah. Oh, that's so poggers, Josh. Yeah.
I don't think the kids.
I don't
No,
think the kids say poggers anymore.
Dude, I had some kids. I told you, but this is how I hate like every time I switch jobs.
I was waiting
like,
for you to
new
say it. This is
slang.
why I hate children.
No. So like, so back,
Understandable.
the early 2010s.
Uh-huh.
Like I was working at a store. I heard these two kids. They're talking about this game console or whatever, and they're like, "Oh man, that's so swag," and then my entire body cringed. Last week I had the same exact experience. I'm like stocking a shelf. All of a sudden, these two kids going up to a game console like, "Yo, man! Oh, the new Zelda's coming out. That's so poggers!" And I just felt the whole body cringed. Was like, again.
Not a good. It's funny that they said swag. I feel like that's kind of an old one at this point.
Well, that was years ago. That's what I'm saying. Like back in the early like 2010s. That happened to me.
Okay, that
Yeah,
checks
yeah.
out more. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, that's what I'm
2010.
Yeah, that
saying.
would definitely make me fucking go inside out with cringe.
Big swag, boy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
YOLO swaggins, baby.
What the
That's an old meme. All right. Well, this has been the Clown Fest, a la the canceled of the session. I forgot
Yes.
to do this at the beginning again because I'm good at this.
We always do.
It's like a 50-50 if we remember or not. Give me the follow or the subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Please leave a comment or a review. Either are acceptable. Spotify has comments now, so you can do it there too. And leave a follow on the Twatters, the Angry Bluebird app. Buzzinga.
Buzzinga.
What?
Bye, bitches.
Deuces.